Have you ever thought about your thinking? I have. Of course, that's part of what I do as a psychologist. I'm going to visit Pinnell Library and my friend Amanda Weir, the reference librarian. She's going to give me some ideas on how to research this topic so I can give the best possible presentation to you in our class. Just a few more keystrokes and she'll have it. Pinnell Library is a nice place to quietly hang out and kick back. And if you're looking for a setting to get in some serious study time, there's no better place on campus. Well, let's see what Amanda has come up with. Psychology section, and this looks like a book I will definitely need to begin my work. Join me for Chapter 6, Theories of Cognitive Development, and I promise, it'll give you something to think about. One of the most important things you can learn in this course is that children think differently than you and I. You can go over something as an adult that's totally logical to you, and you go over it and over it and over it with the child, and she's unable to grasp it. For now. That'll all change with time and experience. But until then, you can talk and teach until you're blue in the face, and nothing will happen. Chapter 6, Cognitive Development, we will explore how children learn how to think. And remember, cognition is about thinking and the mental processes that all go into that. Welcome back to PS213, Child Psychology, and Chapter 6, Theories of Cognitive Development. This chapter features 3 modules: Setting the Stage, Piaget's Theory, Modern Theories of Cognitive Development, and Understanding in Core Domains. Setting the Stage, Piaget's Theory. Jean Piaget is a Swiss psychiatrist, and he was one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. He's frequently referred to as the father of child psychology, and his greatest contribution was his ideas about child cognitive development. Before Piaget, no one really paid scientific attention to how children become mature thinkers. It was assumed, more or less, that they simply gained more information and experience until one day they thought like adults. Piaget completely revolutionized our thinking about this. He was a great observer of children's behavior and thought processes. The most important and overriding principle in his theory is that children actively try to make sense of their world with some kind of order. They make up theories, and he called them junior scientists. Piaget theorizes that infants and children form categories for people, things, events, and experiences. We call these categories schemes. For example, a child early on forms a scheme for butterfly. And part of the characteristics of butterfly, they're small, flimsy, light, very beautiful and colorful. If you chase a butterfly, it floats off, but if you sit still, maybe they come near you. And with each new butterfly, there may be some differences in color, size, and shape, but they easily assimilate into the scheme for butterfly and reinforces that scheme. Now one day, you and your little one maybe working on the garden, it's late in the afternoon, maybe early in the evening, and your little one excitedly points up and says butterfly. And you say, no honey, that's not a butterfly, that's a moth. And our preschooler learns that not everything assimilates into the scheme for butterfly. Our preschooler has to accommodate and build a new scheme for moth. Either the new experience easily assimilates into the scheme, or it has to be modified and we accommodate and form a new scheme. Piaget theorized that there are times in a child's life where there is so much accommodation going on that they shift into a new gear, into a new stage of cognitive development. And he theorized this happens on average about age 2, 7, and 11 for a total of 4 stages of cognitive development. Piaget reasoned that the first stage is called sensory motor, lasting from birth to about 2 years old. It's a period of adapting to and exploring the environment with the senses and motor behavior. A major accomplishment towards the end of the sensory motor period is the concept of object permanence, which is the understanding that an object still exists even when it's covered up or I can't find it. Before then, out of sight, out of mind. The second stage is called pre-operational, from roughly age 2 to 7 years old. By this stage, the infant is using symbols, and these include words, gestures, drawings, coloring, and playing with toys as symbols of communication. This is a major leap forwards. And while you can begin to have a meaningful conversation with your child, he or she is not always logical. There are a couple problems. One is that the child assumes everyone sees the world as they do. They can't take on another's viewpoint. This is called egocentrism. In our picture here, this is Piaget's classic three-mountain problem. The boy on the left is escorted around the table several times. He can see what's exactly on the table. We ask him where he's seated, what does he see? He describes it accurately. Then we say, what does the doll see on the other side of the table? And the boy continues to describe what he sees, thinking that that's what the doll sees. Another problem is centration. The child does not understand that if you change the physical appearance of matter, the amount or volume stays the same. This is demonstrated in Piaget's most famous invention called the conservation experiments. As our picture shows, the young boy knows that the 2 beakers contain the exact amount of Kool-Aid. We take one and pull it into a taller but narrower cylinder. We ask the child which one has more, or are they the same? The boy will point to the taller one and say that's more. He doesn't understand that we changed the appearance and the shape, but it's still the same. The third stage is concrete operational, from roughly age 7 to 11 years old. By this stage, the child is no longer egocentric, and they've mastered the conservation experiments. He or she really appears capable of adult-like thinking. A problem, however, is that their logic is limited to tangible, here-and-now, real-life problems. They can't deal yet with abstract or hypothetical issues. The fourth and last stage is called formal operational, beginning at roughly age 11 through the rest of your life. By definition, the child can now go beyond concrete operations into abstract and hypothetical thought. They can envision alternate scenarios and their consequences. Creativity and imagination flourish. In short, They're thinking like adults. Piaget's theory is that we all go through these stages in the same exact order. And while some children will be faster or slower than others, there's no leapfrogging ahead. What do we think of Piaget today? Well, he's the pioneer of exploring childhood cognitive development. Before Piaget, there was no one. He was the first. He's a giant. We all stand on his shoulders to look a little further into what the truth is. His greatest contribution is the idea that children are actively exploring their world. They're not passive with their little theories to try to make sense of it all. But that said, there are some weaknesses. His idea of separate stages is not as clear and distinct as he thought. He also underestimated what infants and children can do cognitively. And his greatest strength, the idea of children as lone scientists trying to figure out by themselves, is also the greatest shortcoming. Because now we know, and it's pretty clear, that children also learn from interaction with others. And they learn from interacting with a lot of people. Parents, siblings, family, the whole community. While Piaget's ideas are not bad, let's look at some more newer, fresher, more modern approaches to childhood cognitive development. Module 2, Modern Theories of Cognitive Development. And let's start with Lev Vygotsky. Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist, but who sadly died at age 37 from tuberculosis, but not before he outlined his socio-cultural perspective. Vygotsky said the child is not totally a lone scientist. The child experiences cognitive growth by social interaction with others, including adults, in an informal apprenticeship type of situation where activities are structured and are inseparable from cultural values. Vygotsky had 3 very important ideas that are interrelated, but they all take place in a social and cultural context until the child gets it under independent control. And these are the zone of proximal development, scaffolding, and private speech. The zone of proximal development, often abbreviated as a ZPD, is the space between what a child can do on his own and what he or she can do with assistance. Family, teachers, coaches, and others in the community, whether formally or it just happens naturally and automatically, gently push a child forward in his cognitive development so that what they once could do only with assistance now becomes what they can do on their own. The joy of mastery and competence experienced by the child helps to set a new ZPD at a higher level, and the process starts all over again. In scaffolding, we try to simplify learning by giving just the right amount of help, but no more than is needed. And we use organization, sequencing, planning, and giving hints and cues to foster higher levels of thinking. Vygotsky's 3rd major idea is private speech. An adult talks to a child to direct problem solving. After some time, a child starts talking out loud to instruct and self-regulate. And in the final stage, the child gains enough skill so that their speech becomes private, or what you and I call thinking. Vygotsky was actually a contemporary of Piaget, but the great man from little Switzerland completely overshadowed the Russian in their lifetime. But maybe Vygotsky has the last laugh because his ideas are being rediscovered by a new generation of child psychologists and educators. In fact, American educators say that we need to consider the socio-cultural perspective in teaching children much more than we have in the past. If you're going into elementary education, I think there's a strong chance that you will be trained how to write lesson plans and use ZPDs. A second modern approach is called information processing. The computer is an important part of life today, and it provides us a great model of cognitive processing. Cognitive development includes changes in mental hardware and software. The hardware includes built-in processes from birth, including sensory memory, short-term memory, also known as working memory, and long-term memory. Taking the computer analogy a step further, software includes specific mental programs that allow you to perform specific tasks in a linear sequence of steps and processes. And just like how you upgrade the software programs on your computer, cognitive development in the developing child's brain becomes faster, more efficient, more automatic, and more powerful. This all proceeds slowly and gradually, and there are no abrupt or qualitative changes that create distinct cognitive stages like we would find in Piaget's and Vygotsky's theories. A third modern approach is called core knowledge theories. It has been observed that infants learn quickly and easily in specialized domains such as language, physics, biology, and psychology without any real effort. How do they learn so freely and easily? It's like they don't even break a sweat. It is theorized that the capacity to learn quickly in these areas must be significant for human survival. We'll devote chapter 9 to language, but in this third and last module in this chapter, we'll examine physics and psychology. Module 3, Understanding in Core Domains. Infants understand very quickly about objects, movement, and apparently gravity. They're naive physicists. My favorite demonstration of this is what I call the silver screen experiment. We bring 4.5-month-old infants into the lab, and we show them a rotating silver screen like this. Comes up, and it goes down. Comes back up, and then down to the front. It rotates 180 degrees. Now, nobody's holding it, it just does it by itself, but I don't have that, so I've got to hold it. Next, we introduce a red box. Half of the infants are randomly assigned to this condition. And again, there's nobody holding it, it's just automatic. The screen comes up like this, stops, and then goes back down. Comes up and stops. It can only rotate 90 degrees because the box is blocking it. But the other 4.5-month-old infants are randomly assigned to this group. The screen comes up and it goes like that. It comes back up, comes forward, only to show the red box is visible. Now there's a trap door where the box hides underneath. Which group of infants is more surprised by what they see? Well, of course, it's this one, isn't it? we infer that they're surprised by the seeming impossibility of it, like you and I would watch a magic act. It looks like infants are more aware of some basic principles of objects earlier than Piaget ever thought. Children also understand how people think and behave. We call them naive psychologists. Children gradually acquire a theory of mind between ages 2 and 5, which is a naive understanding of the relationship between mind and behavior. A false belief task illustrates this, like the one in our book. This is Sally. Sally has a bag. This is Anne. Anne has a box. Sally also has a little red rubber ball. Sally puts the ball in her bag and goes for a walk. Anne takes the red rubber ball and puts it in her box. Sally comes back from her walk. Sally wants to play with her ball. Where will Sally look? A typical 3-year-old will say Sally will look for the ball in the box. But the average 4-year-old says Sally will look for the ball in her bag. Now the 4-year-old knows that the ball is in the box, but the 4-year-old also knows that Sally put it in the bag and that's where Sally thinks it is, even though it's in the box. The average 4-year-old knows that behavior is not unpredictable, that it's determined by what's in your mind, your beliefs, and what you know to be true, even though it's wrong. This is the theory of mind. That's it. We spent most of our time on Piaget in this chapter, and then we examined newer and more useful ideas, including the socio-cultural perspective from Vygotsky, information processing, and finally, core knowledge theories